Speaking of Guitar Foundations, one thing that's absolutely essential to be able to do if you're a guitar player is to change your strings. It's kind of like being able to change a flat tire if you drive a car. Hey, it's Nate Savage here, and don't forget to go over to natesavage.com and pick up a copy of the Guitar Foundations ebook or sign up for a private lesson. That's how we keep all these videos rolling along. Anyway, in this lesson for Guitar Foundations, what we're gonna do is take a look at how to change electric guitar strings. I wanted to separate out electric and acoustic guitar just because they're a little bit different. The next video will be acoustic guitar. I'm gonna go through a bunch of tips here to help you get through changing strings for the first time and to make things a little smoother for you if you've been doing it for a while. Also, I'm going to talk about guitar strings in general because when you're first getting into guitar, there's so many options out there that can be tough to know exactly what to buy. Let's see, what do I have here? I have some EXL 110s. Electric guitar strings, 10 gauge strings, and if you don't know what a gauge of a string is or what it's in reference to, all it is, it's the thickness of the high E string or the thinnest string on your set of strings. Now, most electric guitars come set up with either 9 or 10 gauge strings. So that's probably what you're going to be using the majority of the time. A Stratocaster like this will usually come set up with 9s, I believe. A Les Paul or something like that, stock will come set up with 10s. I'm just going to open this and get going. The cool thing about D'Addario strings, and I'm not endorsed, the video's not sponsored, anything like that, is they're color coded, so you know exactly where each string is supposed to go, so that's pretty cool. Okay, thinnest string is your high E string. In this case, I'm putting a set of 10s on this guitar, and that's in thousandths of an inch, so 10 thousandths of an inch, is that how you say that? Anyway, the one tool that I'd recommend, I'm gonna get into some tips here for changing strings in general, but the one tip I have, and this is the first tip out of this list, is to get a string winder. A really good quality string winder will help your guitar string changes go a lot smoother, a lot faster, and it just makes your life easier in general. So get one of these. I've had this Planet Waves one for 15 years. So get a little bit nicer one. The little cheaper ones generally are kind of more trouble than they're worth, or they create problems. So just keep that in mind. So let's go through this little list of tips for changing guitar strings. The first one I already said, get a string winder. Number 2, make sure you put the string on the exact same way you took it off. So if you come around this side of the string, the tuning peg right here, make sure you go back around the same way, not the opposite. And we'll get into all these tips more as we change the strings on the Strat. Number 3, put at least 2 wraps of new string around the peg here. That's going to ensure that it stays on there, it doesn't slip, and it's nice and secure. And number 4, once you have the string on, just stretch it out a little bit to kind of seat it in place, because it's going to not necessarily stretch, but kind of seat, and once you tune it up and have it on there, you're gonna have to tune it up a few times. We'll get into that more. But step number 1 is to just take the strings off, and instead of doing what I just did, starting with your finger, you can just take your string winder and go for it. And once you get it to a certain point, you can just pull it off, right? And for electric guitars, there are a lot of different kinds of bridges, so your guitar may be a little bit different. But for this type of bridge, a Strat, what I do is straighten the string a little bit out right there, because when you push it through here to take it out through the back, it makes it come out a lot easier. You just pull it right out through the back, right here. Okay. So you can do this one string at a time. You can do all 6 at a time, take all 6 off, put all 6 on. It doesn't really matter. I generally like to take all 6 off and then put all 6 on, just because it allows me to get in here and clean underneath the strings where they are. And you can clean the fretboard too if you want, and just clean the entire guitar up. But I'm just gonna go and take all these off, and then we'll get into putting them on. Sometimes what I do as well, and this is a little bit more dangerous. I usually wear glasses, so I really don't even think about it. I just clip the string. That way I don't have a curly end to drag through the bridge part. Or you can just, what you can do is just let the tension off the strings like this a little bit. And these are just shortcuts that make string changing faster over the years for me. So after that, just feed these through. And I like to keep my whammy bar on if you have a tremolo, that way you can kind of fish through the hole a little bit easier. But you're gonna find your own style and what you like best and what works for you as far as changing strings. Oops, I missed one. And be sure to, I'm being super messy right now. I'm not keeping them consolidated at all, because, you know, the point is to get to this video as efficiently as possible to get you guys this information, but normally I would put them in one spot so I don't have pokey ends laying all over the floor and everything, because they will find your feet. Trust me, they will. Anyway, now's a great time to clean under the guitar where the strings are, because it really collects dust under there. So I'm going to grab a washcloth and do that. All right. And one thing that's true for across the board for almost all new guitar players is they're afraid to change their strings because, number one, they're afraid they're going to screw something up. Number two, they're afraid they're going to poke their eye out or or break a string or something like that. The short story is, don't worry about that. Everybody breaks a string occasionally when they're changing strings. The main thing is to jump in and start trying to do it for yourself. The more you do it, the better it will get, faster it will get, and the more you will learn your own process that you prefer for changing strings. It's no big deal. What I would recommend is to buy more than one set of strings if you go out that way. If you break one or mess up putting them on, then you have another one to put on in its place. So what I usually do now is load my guitar up, no matter which one it is. And for a Les Paul, like a Les Paul type guitar, you would just load this through the stop tail. Actually, let me show you, since I have it right here. You would load the string through the back of the stop tail right here, and then just pull it through down to the tuning pegs right there. Same idea, different way of doing it. Tons of different ways out there to do this for guitar. All right, so once you have this loaded up and all the strings are through the bridge, you're going to want to make sure that they're actually all the way through and they're not catching on anything. That'll help you when you're actually putting the strings on down on this end. And one thing that I should mention here is there are lots of different types of metals out there that strings are made of, particularly for electric guitar. And the most common one is nickel-plated steel, and that's exactly what these are. So if you don't know what to go with, if you're seeing some weird kind of alloys or like a pure nickel or something like that, and you're not sure what to go with, just go with regular nickel-plated steel strings. They're kind of the industry standard, and they're the least expensive in general, and they'll do you good until, you know, unless you want to get into different kinds of strings and experiment with them to see what kind of tones you like. Anyway, once you get to this point, this is where a lot of the trouble usually starts with people who are new to putting on guitar strings. So you want to make sure to follow tip 2 to put the string on the exact same way you took it off. You don't want to put, like this low E string, you don't want to put it on the wrong side or wrap it around the wrong way around this peg for the low E string. You want to make sure it's coming in the exact same way you took it off. So what you do is just feed it through the hole, and there are some different variations on tuners. You know, the basic idea is all going to be the same for you. You may have locking tuners or something like a vintage style tuner with a slot in it. If you have that, you have to clip the string and then stick it down in it. But this is definitely the most common type of tuner that you're going to experience, just a normal guitar tuner. I usually leave about this much slack. It's kind of hard. It's about maybe 4 inches. But the idea here is put enough slack on it to get the first wrap around with your finger like this, that's going the correct direction. And the first wrap always goes over the top of the loose end of the string. I'll show you why in a second, but that's kind of it's not a rule, but it's a guideline that helps make the string change go smoother. So I put it around there manually without cranking, and then what I do is kink this up to kind of hold it in place. And then I grab my string winder, and here is the key to changing strings. You have to keep tension on the string while getting a nice downward angle, because all of the subsequent wraps after that first wrap are going to go under the underside of that loose end of the string. So practice doing this. Get your finger to where you can hold this up and push down with your index finger, and then just start cranking. And as long as you get 2 wraps, first one on top, all the subsequent ones underneath, you should be good to go. And normally I would do this really fast. It doesn't take long. I could do a string change in under 6 minutes now. So it'll probably take you a long time the first time you do it, but don't worry, that time will get shorter and shorter. Anyway, get it close. You don't have to get it in tune yet. And then give it a little seat, a little stretch. And then just do the same thing for the next one. Make sure it's all the way through. Again, about 4 inches. Enough to get a manual wrap around the top, over the top of the loose end of the string, kink that up, and then just start cranking. One tip that I do have for you is that if you change string gauges, like if you go from 9s to 10s or 10s to 9s or from 9s to 11s, you are going to need to get your guitar set up and maybe even some more detailed setup work done, because the nut for most guitars is cut specifically for the certain gauge that it's set up with. And for sure you're going to need to adjust the neck, the truss rod on the neck, because lighter gauge strings have less tension. Heavier gauge strings have more tension, so you're going to need to adjust that. That's a little bit out of the scope of this video, but just be aware of that if you change from like 9s to 10s or 10s to 9s, you will need to make some adjustments. So, okay, that one's on. A little bit of stretch. Okay, next one. And this isn't brain surgery or rocket science or brain science or rocket surgery. Just put it through, leave enough to get at least 2 reps, bend it up. First one over the top, second one underneath, and you're good to go. Now you may be thinking, well, what do you do with all these loose ends that are about to poke you in the eye, Nate? Well, let me see. I'm gonna get this closer up to pitch. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave them until I get all 6 strings on, but I'll show you. You can either clip them. If you have a good string winder, it'll come with clippers on the end, which is great. But what I end up doing is just bending them back and forth. If you use this method for one over the top, all the rest underneath of the loose end of the string, you can just bend it off and it will be just fine, because it kind of kinks it in a bind to where it keeps it in place and it's really secure. Next string. And I generally like to put more reps on the thinner strings as it gets thinner, just because it's a little more secure. They're a little more likely to slip in my mind. So at least 2, probably 3 on the higher strings. Okay. B. And this is presents, if you have a Strat, this or any kind of guitar with a straight headstock that's not angled, this brings a new little number into the equation, and that is a string tree right here. You have to use the string tree because it puts downward pressure on the string and helps keep it in the nut slot. It gives you better tone and things like that. So you just want to be aware of that if you have a guitar with a string tree. So same thing, one over the top, bend it up, and then crank. Get at least 2 or 3 under the string tree, and that helps you with that downward pressure. Alrighty, so it's not as bad. And that's it. And one more. Okay. Double checking to make sure that that string ball is hitting the underside of the bridge. And just crank. Get a little better kink on that. Okay, I've got the new strings on. Now we need to clean this mess up and get the guitar in tune. So what I usually do is get the strings pretty close. Doesn't have to be perfect, but then I reseat the strings again, stretch them out a little bit, just to make sure that they're not going to do anything really drastic, because you'll notice sometimes either the ball won't be all the way seated against the bottom end of the bridge and it'll go coo, and you'll have a lot of slack where you have to tighten it back up, or they'll just stretch out a bit and seat a little bit more to where you have to, like that. See, it's about a half step or a step off. And once I do that and they're nice and seated, what I do is just bend it back and forth and it just comes off. Super convenient. You don't have to have clippers with you, which is nice. But you can clip them if you want, because this is it can be a little bit tough on your fingers. But I do it with my left hand because in my guitar playing hand, so I already have calluses there, so it's not a big deal. And there you go. Let me get rid of this. So that's how you change strings on an electric guitar, with a lot of tips along the way from there. Just tune it up and be aware that when you change strings like this, they are going to take a while to seat. You're going to have to tune it up, they're going to stretch, seat, and then you have to tune it up a little more and repeat that process a few times until it kind of starts to stabilize. So your guitar may be a little bit different than this, but that's okay. You'll figure it out. If you have any questions about this, you can leave them in the comments below. I'll get back to you there. Or you can email me, nate@natesavage.com. You can also head over to natesavage.com, pick up a copy of the Guitar Foundations ebook, schedule a private lesson. I'll see you in the next video where we take a look at some of the subtle differences on changing strings on an acoustic guitar. That's it.